Following a U.S. intelligence investigation, Chinese authorities have come out to slam the idea that the coronavirus originates from a Chinese Wuhan laboratory. China's ambassador to South Africa says it's anti-science for politicians and intelligence communities to trace the origins of viruses. Now, according to Dr. Steven Kuo, who is a senior adjunct professor at UCT's Graduate Business School, relations between the two superpowers couldn't get any worse. In fact, Dr. Kuo joins us now for more on the story. And it's, as you say, I mean, relations between the U.S. and China have been in the doldrums for some time, perhaps worsened by the presidency of Donald Trump. This doesn't do any good for it.
No. So, as I say, the relationship between the two, certainly the one superpower and the one rising great power, it's as bad as it ever has been since 1970s. So it can't really get much worse. And it seems that both sides now have their heels dug in. National pride is at stake, and nobody wants to be seen as weak in the eyes of their own people. So we do have a stalemate here.
I mean, is it, you know, the world trying to get to the bottom of the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic? Is that one legitimate argument to be made here? Or is it politicking?
I think you've already seen what most of us can see. I think from, if you like, a perspective of those of us who live and work in Africa, it's both. It ought to be a scientific endeavor that the scientists around the world work together to find a solution. And a solution to COVID and controlling the pandemic, a part of that ought to be finding out the origins with the start. However, given the great power rivalry between the U.S. and China, and we've seen this since when Donald Trump was still president, it has become very, very politicized. When the WHO was praising the Chinese in the sort of mid-2020, Donald Trump was very unhappy, saying that the WHO was dancing to Chinese tunes. And now, I suppose the gloves on the other hand, the WHO says, look, let's investigate a little bit more. Then now the Chinese are saying, look, no, the US is controlling WHO. So it has become highly politicized.
Yeah.
And you can all see this is the case.
I suppose it doesn't do China any favors that there is this pushback against investigations into the origins of the virus.
I don't think the Chinese were against a neutral scientific team that's made up of different nations going to investigate. I don't think they have a problem with that in principle. But now tempers are flared now, and both sides are accusing the other side of controlling the WHO. So both sides are saying we're being reasonable, but now it's becoming now the pride is at stake. So I don't know. I don't think the Chinese will want to step back. On the insistence that no, this is we're not going to allow it. Never say never, of course.
No face-to-face summit yet between U.S. President Joe Biden and China's Xi Jinping. We talked about the presidency of Donald Trump not doing China-U.S. relations any favors. Is it surprising to you that this is perhaps not higher up on the U.S. president's agenda?
Actually, I think undoubtedly China is the top priority for U.S. foreign policy. Of course, foreign policy always comes after domestic policy. Now, if you look at the world leaders who has visited Joe Biden, it was the Japanese Prime Minister was the first to visit. They're followed by the President of South Korea, right? And then Joe Biden went and visited at the G7 summit in the UK. It is very much about China, right? right? It's the two East Asian powers, and then it's the European allies. So the fact that there hasn't been a summit yet does not mean that China is not on the top of the priority list for the U.S. president.
The issue of the Chinese economy set to overtake the U.S. as the world's biggest economy, you know, projections are putting it at in about 10 years or so. You know, at the start of our interview, we talked about whether it is science, whether it is a case of trying to get to the bottom of the pandemic, or whether it is a case of politicking. This statistic in particular puts the issue of politicking perhaps in sharp focus.
I think so. I think the U.S. is now nervous. The U.S. is quite nervous that China, which has not adopted a U.S.-style democratic governance and liberal norms, that the Chinese are very popular and very successful economically and militarily and politically. So the U.S. is becoming quite nervous, and then that's when we saw Donald Trump beginning to get nervous and beginning to, I suppose, push back. Huawei is the best example, because Huawei's 5G technology were going to pose a threat to U.S. dominance when it comes to telecommunications and internet, and that's the technology of the future. So the U.S. is very nervous in pushing back. And it takes to the dance, of course. The Chinese have chosen not to be quiet, not to be subservient. The Chinese has chosen to be more assertive. Now, you can call it assertive, or you can call it belligerent. But the Chinese have chosen to stand its ground. And now we have, if you like, the two elephants fighting.
So the U.S. is already on the back foot, and then put it into context, what's just unfolded with its withdrawal in Afghanistan, the issues it's facing in its own country insofar as the Black Lives Matter movement is concerned, the legacy left by Donald Trump. The U.S. is finding harder and harder to take the high ground on a whole range of issues, not least economics, politically, and so much more.
Indeed. I suppose since the end of the Cold War, where there was only one single superpower over the last 20 years, the world order was one where liberal democracy was going to become the only and the dominant and the only and the best form of government, and neoliberal economics was going to be the most powerful. However, it hasn't worked out like that. The U.S. retreat from Afghanistan after 20 years, and how quickly the Afghanistan army has given up the fight, has shown that actually democracy, for what it's worth, is not the silver bullet that's going to solve everybody's issues. It's much more complicated than that. And the current U.S. domestic politics with the two sides are also at a stalemate, where the U.S. domestic politics, where there's Black Lives Matter, where there is the two ruling parties not budging an inch, it's showing democracy in a very bad light. And those of us who sit in Africa, yes, democracy is hard won, and we're very keen not to lose our civil liberties. But we're also seeing the successes that China has had, right? Nobody can doubt that over the last 30, 40 years, Chinese economic growth has been phenomenal. And most of its population has been lifted out of poverty. Its economic policies has been largely successful. And those of us who's based here are, if you want to grow your economy and eradicate poverty, it seems that China seems to offer excellent example. So and the U.S. can see this. So now there is now beginning to be competition, between the two, both two superpowers economically, but also different ways of life, different ways of governing. So it becomes tricky. We of course value democratic government here in South Africa, certainly, but we also see rampant corruption here in South Africa. In China, corruption is very much under control. Obviously there is some, but it's certainly not as bad as in South Africa. So developing countries, in the countries of the South, we're looking at the two powers at each other, and we try not to get tangled in the great power rivalry, but we also would like to benefit as much as possible economically, support business investment. That's what we would like from the US and from China.
Dr. Steven Kuo, let me thank you for your time this morning, giving us lots to chew on there. Adjunct Senior Lecturer at UCT's Graduate School of Business, as we unpack just exactly what US-China relations mean for those two superpowers, perhaps one still rising superpower, and of course the rest of the world as well.